understand clearly, how these things happen and to understand the real cost of tobacco harm. So we'll be building on our knowledge to have those knowledge wings to be able to get ready to fly with facts so that when you have conversations and engagements with other people, we can easily clarify what's true and what's not regarding tobacco and tobacco related harm. The second module is an introduction to advocacy and policy frameworks. So this module gives us a sneak peek into how different policies work and policies in the context of tobacco. We have policies around cessation, we have policies around availability, policies on marketing, policies on tobacco industry engagement with government, and so on and so forth. So this module will help us just understand how these policies work and particularly get to now understand, how do we influence policies, whether we want to do it at the local level, local being the family, local being the community, local being the county, or at the national level. And if God permitting, we are able to go to regional and international levels to also just be able to have that kind of influence on policy frameworks. And the third module is on tobacco taxation, what we call a game changer for public health. Taxation has for a long time been recognized as one of the most evidence-based interventions in reducing tobacco usage and harms. So this particular module, module 3, tobacco taxation, will just help us be able to understand better how really does tobacco taxes save lives, because that's what we believe. And there is data and evidence to show that it actually does save lives. So we're hoping to be able to get a strong foundation on that and how to be able to move around with the element of tobacco taxation. Then the last module is putting everything that we've learned into action. We'll be learning about the harms of tobacco. We're learning about policy frameworks and introduction to advocacy. We're learning about tobacco taxation. Then we now move into how to bring all of this together and look at digital campaigns and policy engagement. How do we use the knowledge that we've gained, move from a theoretical perspective to an action point of view? And again, just going back to the feedback that we got from so many of you, already quite a number involved in tobacco control in one way or another. Some either as addiction counselors, some creating awareness within the local communities and schools, some having conversations online, and some even working in programs and organizations that prioritize youth health and well-being. And so we can see that already some of you have a wealth of knowledge, have some experience in putting knowledge, in turning knowledge into policy engagement. So we hope that the fourth module, which is advocacy in action, will help us turn everything that we learn into building a campaign, into building a movement where we are able to work together for a long time, where we are able to, we usually call it noise making, where we are able to make incredible noise to lead to positive action, to policies that safeguard and protect the health and well-being of young people. As we will learn later on, recent studies show that quite a number of young people in universities are already getting into and using tobacco products, be it the traditional cigarettes, be it the novel products, as we call them, which we'll learn about as we go on with this journey. And it is really, really important to be able to make noise for health. So it's our hope that we'll be able to turn everything into action. The last thing really that I just want to highlight is that at the end of it all, we hope everyone is able to explain tobacco harms to health, to the economy, to the society, and to the people surrounding you. Secondly, you're better able to understand how taxes actually protect youth and could be used to fund public health services that again safeguard the health and well-being of young people. The number three, you are able to speak confidently about different types of laws and policy frameworks that can be deployed in tobacco control and safeguarding the health and well-being of the population. And then finally, to launch campaigns and really advocate like a boss, making boss moves within this space would be such a great flex. And we hope to see it in action as we move forward together. So I do hope that creates some kind of anticipation and excitement, and that we are ready to get on to put on our boots and caps and shirts and get onto the battlefield. Thank you very much, Jenny.
Thank you very much, Benjamin. That was very comprehensive, and I hope that all of us are even more excited about this training, because it's not just meant to be here. We are not just meant to talk about it and end there. We even have in action activity. So I hope that you're excited, and I hope that you have noted down that we are meant to go and be positive and confident and advocate like a boss. I had that, and I was really excited. So I would just like to introduce, sorry, Patrick, can you hear me? Or I'm still not audible. Um, it's okay. We will do our best to be as audible as we can. And so on to the next, I would just like to bring on board Kinya Nina, an author and psychologist who has done work with SCAD and as an individual towards tobacco control and advocacy. And I'd just like to call upon her to take the stage from here. Karibu sana, Nina.
Thank you so much,
Mhm.
Jay. Am I audible?
Yes, you are. Go ahead.
All right, thank you. Hi everyone. I hope you're all doing well, and thank you for joining in. My name is Kinya. I am part of SCAD. We've been trying to create awareness and do great impact when it comes to tobacco control as well as advocacy. And I'm also thrilled to be part of the training today, where I'll briefly take us through an overview of tobacco industry as well as their products, more specifically to our Kenyan context, so that even as we get within the training, we already have like an overview of what it is exactly that we're dealing with. So before we even move to the next stage, I would love to invite our audience. Hapo kwa chat box, what tobacco products do you know? And what maybe nicotine product also do you know? I know we've heard about tobacco maybe for way a long time. So what products do we know when you talk about tobacco? Anyone, you can just text on the chat box. All right, thank you. I think we have one from David who mentions vape. Then we have Patrick who mentions cigars. And there is more on the local ones like Chavez, Cuba, local tobacco. Thank you guys. Let's keep on engaging on the tobacco products that we know. Right. So in the next slide, there's Oris, there's Sportsman from Joshua. Then there's Velo and Lift from David, who mentioned that they're modern ones. Great. So from this presentation, we're going to just have an overview, as I mentioned, of tobacco and nicotine products. Then again, tobacco industry in Kenya, And then we also briefly look at the current laws and regulatory frameworks, and then also what challenges are we experiencing even as an institution in regards to tobacco control, and then also what are our efforts, especially SCAD, when you're looking at the prevention efforts and interventions. So when you're looking at the aspect of tobacco, the next slide, Jen. We think that tobacco remains a major public issue in Kenya, and we've highlighted the several tobacco products that we know, and there are many more than that. But now you find that it is a major public issue when it comes to health, not only on those that directly, those who smoke it directly, but also from what we call secondary smoking. And I know in our households, maybe not in your family, but around when you're growing up, there is literally each and every person had an experience with secondary smoking, or a family where a child grew up in an household where there is tobacco use and so on and so forth. So common tobacco products that we have cigars. These could be manufactured, like the ones people buy on shops, and the other ones that are hand rolled. There is also smokeless tobacco, especially that people normally chew. And most of them also sniff, especially we know them from probably grandparents. There's shisha, which at times could be a water pipe. At times, it's also used as part of tobacco, and we're told that it was banned in Kenya since 2017. But I know qua ground, things could be different. Then you also have the recent and modern ones, which include the electronic cigars, and we call them e-cigarettes and at times vape as well. Then you have nicotine replacement therapies, especially for those who are trying to quit. They could be using the gums, the patches, and so on and so forth. So those are the samples or examples of the nicotine and tobacco products that we have, and in visuals, some of them are included there that you might be battling with. And fast forward, when you're looking at Kenya as a country, remember we've seen that this is one of the major issues that you're battling or that you're dealing with. And this means when you're looking at prevalence, when you talk, someone is unmuted. When you talk about prevalence, we're looking at how widespread is it. And so in Kenya as a country, we think that 11.6 of adults use tobacco products. This is directly. Remember, we're also looking at the aspect of secondary smoking. There's someone who's unmuted, kindly mute. And so with this, we think that it could be either cigars, tobacco. Raphael? Thank you. All right. So we think that could be smoked, at times could be smokeless. And then we're seeing at the aspect of men and women, we see that men majorly use it more than women. But this also differs maybe according to culture, where it's more cool for men to do it than women. That is in the African culture. We're seeing also at times the market and also health awareness, where if it was a woman, we'll be looking at the aspect of children, maybe pregnancy, and so on and so forth. And when you're seeing at the prevalence also, we're looking at us as young people, that is youth and earlier initiation, that we see if we ask majority of individuals who use tobacco, when were they introduced to it? Most of them will tell you at the ages of 13 to 15, which looks at the beginning or the onset of adolescence. That is in the next slide. That's where you find most of them were initiated. Some probably due to peer pressure, like maybe over the holidays, their friend used it and they get back to school. Now they want to share the experiences. Again, we are looking at the aspect of advertising and marketing, where you find maybe most of the marketing targets men more than women. And that is where we're seeing that also earlier initiation means that they could be at the aspect of long-term addiction risk. All right. So that is just a usage, but then tobacco also in Kenya is more of an industry on its own. It's not only tobacco, there is an industry. Like when you talk about food products, we're talking about maybe Kenafric and so on and so forth. When you talk about the cloth industry, Joshua, am I audible now? Maybe you could react with an emoji. All right. So when you talk about tobacco, as I mentioned, it is an industry, just like when you're talking about food industry, clothing. And so you see that the key players of tobacco industry in Kenya is what we call BAT, also known as British American Tobacco Kenya. We also have a key player that is Mastermind Tobacco Kenya. So you find, could it be cigarettes, could it be processed tobacco? Majority of it is processed by BAT. So you find like in the East African region, Kenya is an herb oil leading producer to this. It of course gives jobs, maybe to farmers also it is a source of income, but we cannot avoid the fact that it poses health risks, not only to those who are using it, but to those who are not using it as well. As we continue, probably before we finish all the modules, we have gotten to understand what are these health risks that you're talking about. So in Kenya, we see that in Migori, Bungoma, and Busia counties, that is where we have a high prevalence of tobacco farming. Guys who could hear me, if you can hear me, you can respond with an emoji. I see two concerns. So
You're clear. Maybe they could check their internet. I can hear you clearly.
Okay, thank you.
All right, go ahead.
All right, so we see that in Kenya, we have Migori, we have Bungoma and Busia counties, which are very leading when you're looking at the aspects of tobacco farming. And we see that at times, it's not only about the health risk, but also it is very labor intensive. I mean, it takes quite a lot from the farmers. And then you also see, when you're looking at the processing of tobacco, there's what you call curing. So you find that most of the times, if farmers are forced to do deforestation, maybe of trees and vegetation, just to find a way of curing this tobacco. And then you find that at times there is also potential crop substitution, because you might be wondering, now that you're campaigning against tobacco, what happens to these farmers? There could be the option of crop substitution. But when you're looking at the history of tobacco farming, it began in 1935 in Nyanza, and this means it is during the colonial era, where you find that it was initiated by the settlers. So in 1954, we also have what we call Swynnerton Plan, which was implemented to promote better farming practices. And then in 1956, a cigarette factory was opened in Nairobi. So you can imagine we're in 2025 for how long this has been going on. And you see that the production remained low initially. But then over time, in 1960, that's when now BAT expanded the tobacco production. So you can see BAT is not just a company which came right now. It is a company that has been there over years. And in 1975, there we see the aspect of Kuria district becoming a major tobacco producer. In 1980, that's where we find challenges in the tobacco industry. But then in 2010 to 2019, we find that there is a drop in farming, probably because of the new agricultural trends. But this does not mean that it is not a threat, because you can see that the consumption increases more. And why is it that we are learning about tobacco and nicotine use today through this advocacy? It's because there are several health, family, relationships, social, financial, and even psychological effects of tobacco and nicotine use, which we're going to learn more as we gear into this training. And as a country, Kenya is really trying to come on board with legal and also policy measures, which get to assist us to regulate the production and even manufacturing of these tobacco. As we're beginning, Benjamin highlighted to us that there are tax policies which have been put on board to regulate this. So we have what we call Tobacco Control Act of 2007, which is a law regulating how tobacco can be manufactured, sold, and also advertised in the country. And this works hand in hand with WHO framework, which also looks at the aspects of tobacco control. Remember, when you're talking about health issues, WHO is a key player, especially in the aspect of health policies. So we see that this board has assisted with controlling how these products are marketed. And again, we've seen that as a country, there is a ban on advertising, promotion, and also sponsorship. I don't know if you can remember growing up, there used to be so much ads on cigar youth and so on and so forth. But right now, we're seeing even the cigar packages have images which prohibit or which try to communicate a negative message about smoking. So this is also a form of regulation that the country has trying to bring on board. And that is also we're looking at the aspect of graphic health warnings, where you see there are several images which show maybe how your teeth could be, if it's a mother who is pregnant, the effects, and so on and so forth. We also have a ban in public smoking, where you find in most spaces it's written no smoking zone, which tries to regulate smoking, especially now that you're looking at secondary smoking. So you find in public spaces, maybe in matatu, in restaurants, in schools, it could be prohibited. And then again, we find that in 2017, there was a ban on shisha, where Kenya became one of the very first African countries to impose that. I know kwa ground it could be different, but ideally there was a ban on that. But when we're doing all these advocacy and regulations, it also comes with a challenge as a country. So one of the challenges that you are having is that the industry interferes in policy making. Remember, we saw that BAT wasn't established yesterday. It is an industry that has been there for quite some time. So they also find ways of interfering with policy making. And then we also know about the aspect of fake cigars. Maybe if ideally one costs 10 bob, you find there's one that is being sold probably at 5 bob. So there's a lot of illicit trade and smuggling even of cigarettes within the country. And you know, people will always go for the cheap one, which also brings on board more healthier risks. And there is also inadequate enforcement of laws, especially in a country where there is a lot of corruption here and there. So you find the policies are there, yes, but they're not being followed. And those also not enacting policies, there's nothing done about it. And then lastly, we have the new trends in tobacco and nicotine in world. That is especially when you're looking at the aspect of e-cigarettes and vape as well. So those are the major challenges that we face in this industry. But we also have interventions that we're trying to bring on board. Remember, every solution also, every problem, try also to come on board with a solution. Then as CAD, what do we do to create awareness about this? So one of the things that we do is awareness campaigns. Most of them are based in schools. We also do educations in the community, in churches as well, where we engage a lot of individuals to be able to learn about tobacco and nicotine use. We also have peer-to-peer education, which are youth-led discussions. I believe what we're doing here, other than it being a training, also is peer-to-peer education, where we're going to discuss and engage on more about tobacco use and awareness. Again, SCAD has what we call SCAD clubs, which are school-based clubs, and they are more of anti-drug clubs. As you can see, our logo goes by the aspect of Niko Sober, where we're trying to create more awareness of a sober generation. So these anti-drug clubs are also part of the interventions that we're doing. Then again, advocacy, where SCAD partners with several institutions and several individuals when it comes to policy making, not only on tobacco, but also on the aspects of substance use. We also have partnerships, more specifically with NACADA, MOH, and other institutions, where we try to create awareness and research more on substance use and also creating awareness about tobacco. So those are major interventions and what SCAD has been doing for quite some time. And I'm hoping that you'll be able to interact more and more with these interventions so that we can also be able to adapt them as individuals in our campaigns and also awareness. And I'm wondering, even as we continue with these trainings, it is important for us as individuals to think about it and see, what am I doing as a person to aid this campaign? And if you're not doing it, what is it that you will do after this training to aid this awareness and advocacy? Because SCAD is you, SCAD is I, and both our efforts will assist us to create a more sober generation. So I'm open to questions in the next 4 minutes, should we have any. Feel free to just type on the chat box. All right, thank you, David and Weston, for responding. Andrea, do you have a question? Andrea? Okay. All right.
Thank you very much, Kenya. That was amazing. And if please let's appreciate her the online way. That there is this emoji that I've just shared. Please let's give her those. Even if you want to do hand claps, please let's clap for her and let's just appreciate her for that session. I would just like to take from a few people who'd like to give us their takeaway for this particular session. Just two people. If there isn't any, we will move to the next part. But I would just like to hear from you your key takeaway from that session that we've just had. You can type them in the chat, or you can just take one moment to unmute. I've seen that there is a question from Joshua Mutama. I will note that, and to the speakers who are coming up next and to the ones who've just spoken, please kindly remain for the training so that we are able to take the question at the very last session, last segment, so that we can have a Q&A. That is more, there's a time that has been set for that. So thank you, Joshua Mudama, for the question. Anyone with feedback? The key takeaway? Anyone with the answer to what they're currently doing to aid in tobacco control? All right. It seems that there is no one. All right. David Ndiba says, I appreciate the history of tobacco production in the country, and I believe it helps us see the roots of the whole tobacco use system. Can we get the slides for the same? Zilipita Haraka. No problem. That is well noted, David. We'll respond to that. Thank you so much. Yes, tobacco is a whole industry, and British tobacco industry has been there for years and years. So yes, it's a good history, and it at least helps us to analyze the roots. I see David Mandu also says, sensitizing my peers on the effect of tobacco. All right, that is what you're currently doing to aid in tobacco control. Lovely. So I've gotten the two feedback that I was looking for. The ladies are silent, but sawa. I see also Fidel has a question. Is that a question or statement? How tobacco farming was introduced and the history of tobacco, how we youth can help in tobacco sensitization and control. That's your key takeaway. Sawa. Thank you very much, Fidel, as well. We want to move not briefly, but we have to move to the next segment. You can keep typing your key takeaways from that session, but also keep typing in your questions for Kenya. She'll be here to respond to them. So next, we're going to have Dr. Catherine. And Dr. Catherine is the Executive Director of NCD Alliance, Kenya. And she's also a pharmacist by profession with a PhD in specialization in medicinal chemistry and from the University of Technology in the UK. She holds key positions in the non-communicable diseases arena as an executive director. And for those who do not know, that tobacco is a big contributor to non-communicable diseases. So I will just call her to take from here. Dr. Catherine, karibu sana.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. And hi. Sorry, Kenyan, I have a small challenge with my presentation. Can you see it? No.
No, I can't. It's all right.
I've emailed it.
You've emailed it. I'll share it in a bit.
Yeah,
All
sure.
right.
Sorry about that. I kind of got stuck in a jam at some point. But maybe as we wait for you to email the presentation, I can ask a couple of questions, and you guys can type in the chat box. What are the health effects of tobacco use? That's one question. You can answer any of them. The second question, what are the social effects of tobacco use? And the last question is, what are the economic effects of tobacco use? So if you're able, you can just put them in the chat box as we wait for the presentation to come up. Yeah, so yeah, switch off this video. Yeah, thanks very much. So on behalf of NCD Alliance, I want to thank SCAD for inviting us to participate in this training forum. And I'd just like to take you through. I'll look at the responses in a short while. But I know I've wasted a bit of time here. So can I have the next slide, please? So I'm talking about the health and social and economic effects of tobacco use with a specific focus on Kenya. So these are the questions that I've just asked you, and I'll look at them in a little while. I saw somebody wrote cancer as one of the health effects. Is this on a slideshow?
Yeah, it's giving me a bit of a problem. Let me stop sharing it and share it again.
Okay. So maybe I can look at the other answers. Yeah, social effect. Yes, that is very true. Non-smokers are actually more affected by tobacco smoke than the smokers themselves. They're actually more at risk. So health effects causes diseases like cancer, heart attack, stroke, chronic respiratory illnesses, harms unborn babies, weakens the immune system, highly addictive due to nicotine. So well done. Okay, yeah, thanks. So everyone can see the presentation? Okay, maybe we can move on to the next slide, please. This is just an outline of my presentation. So I'll just start with a brief introduction. Then I'll move on to just describing tobacco. So essentially, as I was introduced, I'm from the NCD Alliance of Kenya, which is the national umbrella body of all organizations, which includes patient groups, NGOs, and professional associations involved in advocacy for, as well as prevention and control, and also care and rehabilitation of persons living with or at risk of developing non-communicable diseases, which we normally refer to as NCDs. We're registered as an NGO, and we have a vision of an NCD-free Kenya. We strive to be the lead organization on NCDs across the continuum of care, meaning all the way from prevention to palliative care and rehabilitation and survivorship. And our main areas of work are advocacy, meaningful involvement of persons living with different NCDs, research and knowledge management. Next slide, please. This is just a slide which shows you the burden of non-communicable diseases in Kenya, which account for 41% of all deaths in Kenya. And basically about half the hospital admissions are due to NCDs, and about 55% of hospital deaths are actually due to non-communicable diseases. The pie chart shows you the different types of non-communicable diseases. CVDs, these are cardiovascular diseases, diseases of the heart and the blood vessels, which account for 33%. Cancer, about 20% of the deaths. Chronic respiratory diseases, about 7%. Diabetes, 6%. And other NCDs account for the remainder. Those other NCDs would include things like sickle cell disease, rare diseases, and so on. It's important for us to remember, if we can just go back, NCDs reduce household incomes by about 29%, and they're associated with a 23% reduction in household income relative to households which are affected by communicable diseases. So basically that is telling us that...
No, seriously, who are you? Raised by a single mom?
Sorry?
Dorms at Bronx College. Got a brother in prison. I'm nobody. I'm a townie. My
Can
great-grandfather.
somebody please mute?
He's Osborne.
So basically, NCDs are a lot more expensive to manage than communicable diseases, and this is because they tend to be lifelong conditions. Next slide, please. This is a slide which shows the different types of non-communicable diseases: the cardiovascular disease, chronic respiratory disease, cancers, diabetes, mental and neurological conditions. So mental health is actually an NCD. The main risk factors: unhealthy diets. These are diets which are high in sugars, fats, and salt. Tobacco use, which is what we're talking about today. Use of alcohol, physical inactivity, and air pollution. So those have been identified as the main risk factors for NCDs. A risk factor is something which makes you more likely to get the disease. Next slide, please. Moving on to tobacco. So basically tobacco is the dried leaves of the plant species from Nicotiana. There are actually more than 70 species of this particular type of plant. The main one which is used is Nicotiana tabacum. And as was mentioned in the previous presentation, tobacco is either smoked, it's chewed, and or can also be sniffed. Important for us to remember that tobacco actually contains more than 7,000 chemicals, 250 of which are harmful, and 60 are known to be cancer-causing. Nicotine, as we've heard, is a addictive component in tobacco. It is actually a stimulant. A stimulant is something which increases transmission between the brain and body organs, and it basically has effects on different organ systems. The cardiovascular system, which is a system for blood vessels and the heart. Here it increases blood pressure, increases heart rate, increases the heart rhythm. It also constricts blood vessels, which is why you end up with increased blood pressure. It also has effects on the respiratory system, where prolonged use will cause damage to the vessels. I'm trying to think of the name. Yeah, so basically we'll end up with reduced lung capacity. It also has effects on the nervous system. So nicotine, as I've said, is the addictive component in tobacco. And this is what makes people to be addicted. And in terms of other long-term effects, you have cardiovascular diseases, type 2 diabetes, cancers, and other types of NCDs. Just to mention that although many people think that tobacco only causes cancer, tobacco is actually probably the biggest risk factor for cardiovascular disease. So basically, in terms of tobacco use, smoking, tobacco is a major cause of cardiovascular disease. So basically heart disease, stroke, and other circulatory problems. Cardiovascular disease is a leading cause of death in men and women. And tobacco use increases the risk of blood clots and will block the blood flow to the heart. So you end up with a heart attack, a myocardial infarction, or death of the heart muscle. You end up with a stroke if the clot is in the brain, or else you can end up with what they call peripheral arterial disease, which is an impediment of the blood flow to your legs. And this can actually result in things like gangrene. And many people do have their legs amputated because of the impaired blood flow. If you get a wound, that wound is not going to heal. If I can move on to the next slide. Looking at the global outlook in terms of tobacco. So basically, tobacco use is associated with a 70% increase in the risk of adverse health consequences. It is a main risk factor leading to death globally. I believe you're aware that cardiovascular disease is a leading cause of death globally. 8 million people die annually from tobacco use. 200 million disability-adjusted life years are linked to tobacco use, and this was in 2019. Basically meaning the disability-adjusted life years is meaning that you're living with a disability of one form or another, which means that your basically your quality of life is reduced. 80% of global deaths from tobacco occur in low and middle income countries like ours. Again, there's an increase to 10% of annual deaths. There will be an increase of 10% of annual deaths by 2023. This should actually be 2030, unless strict tobacco control measures are adopted. So the global burden of tobacco remains very high. And current smokers globally, about 1.3 billion, which is about 22% of the global population. You can have the next slide, please. So what are the health harms of tobacco use? As I've mentioned, it's a key risk factor for non-communicable diseases. It's also a risk factor for communicable diseases like tuberculosis and pneumonia. Smokers are more likely than non-smokers to develop TB and also to have more severe TB symptoms and a higher risk of tuberculosis relapse or reoccurrence. Also leads to poor treatment outcomes and medication adherence, drug-resistant tuberculosis, increased transmission of tuberculosis, and tuberculosis-related deaths. In terms of NCDs, as I've mentioned, it is a main risk factor for chronic respiratory diseases, cardiovascular diseases, cancers, and type 2 diabetes. But the main thing that we need to remember, tobacco use results in disability and also death. Next slide, please. Harmful effects include increased gum disease, tooth loss, bad breath, stained teeth. There's a decrease in your immune system function, which means you're more likely to get infections, and those infections may not heal, may not resolve quickly. Short-term also decrease in the sense of taste and smell, also causes premature aging of skin. And in terms, it has major effects on mental health, especially in terms of depression and anxiety. In children and teens, it causes health problems for children and teens who are either smoking or exposed to secondhand smoke. They are likely to have health problems in later life. And especially in teenagers, it is likely to affect brain development. And it also affects physical health as well as physical fitness. Next slide, please. Looking at tobacco use in Kenya, the likelihood of current tobacco use is dependent on the age, the gender, employment status, as well as closely linked with alcohol consumption. Up to 13.3% of males use tobacco, compared to 23%. Probably got this back to front. This is from the STEP survey, 23% of female use. In 2014, 11% of the Kenyan population aged 15 years and above, about 2.5 million people, were using tobacco products. It's important for us to remember that tobacco use imposes significant economic costs on Kenya's health system, and more men than women suffer from tobacco-related illnesses. If we look at tobacco-related deaths, this is between 2012 and 2022. More than 60,000 people aged 35 and above had illnesses associated with tobacco use. About more than 9,000, almost 10,000 deaths were attributed to cigarette smoking, and 1 in 5 tobacco-related deaths. Basically, 1 in 5 tobacco-related deaths, which is in Kenya, this is much higher than the rate in countries like Germany and Spain. So it appears we're not doing very well in relation to other countries. Next slide, please. This just shows you the different types of conditions in persons aged 35 and above between 2012 and 2021. We have bronchitis, which is an emphysema, which is a yellow band. Chronic airway obstruction, which is the green band, about 39%. And then pneumonia and influenza, which is the purple band, which is about 58.5%. So if we can move on to the next slide. This is a graph, apologies, it's a bit small, which shows cigarette smoking attributable mortality in Kenya for persons aged 35 plus. This is by disease, and this is between 2012 and 2021. From this, you can see that diabetes accounted for deaths from diabetes related to tobacco cigarette use was 6%, cardiovascular disease 9%, tuberculosis 13%, malignant cancers 31%. The major causes of death during this period of time were respiratory diseases, but this is also, if you look at the time frame, this included the time between 2020-2021, which was during the COVID pandemic, which would account for why the respiratory diseases, deaths due to respiratory diseases were so high. We'd have expected the cardiovascular diseases to be much higher than those due to respiratory diseases. Next slide, please. Somebody asked a question about secondhand smoke. It's important to remember that children are more susceptible to the effects of secondhand smoke, and adult exposure to secondhand smoke can cause immediate adverse effects on the cardiovascular system. Okay, so basically secondhand smoke is associated with an increase of coronary heart disease, which is a disease of the heart muscle, also stroke, atherosclerosis, which is a thickening of your blood vessels, and adult onset asthma. It is also known to cause, it has also been known to cause and be documented to cause breast cancer and nasal sinus cancers. Okay, next. So let's turn to the economic harms in Kenya. Basically, tobacco use imposes significant economic costs on the Kenya's health system. And this is due to either direct or indirect costs. So direct costs are on the health system because of the tobacco-induced diseases. And these would be attributed, well, the cost would be attributed to the diagnosis, the medical supplies, that's the drugs and everything else that is required, required, consultation, which would include the staff costs, other overheads, infrastructure, and government subsidies for health. In 2021, the costs associated with tobacco-related illnesses was between $544.4 and $756.2 million. 27% to 48% was due to indirect costs. This is between 52 to 73% of the healthcare related costs. So essentially you can see that in terms of economic burden, tobacco use is a big burden on the health system. It also causes economic strain on households, especially because in our country, most families have limited insurance covers. So basically most of their healthcare costs are paid out of pocket, especially when it comes to non-communicable diseases. Indirect costs are associated with lost productivity. This would be because of one being sick and not being able to work, and this will reduce household income. Next slide, please. In 2022, between $2.2 to $3 were lost to costs associated with tobacco-related illness for every dollar accrued from the tobacco tax revenue. So basically, even though we are collecting revenue from tobacco tax, we are losing for each dollar from the tobacco tax, we are losing between $2 and $3 because of the health-related illnesses, health illnesses related to tobacco use. If we look at the treatment of tobacco-related illness, and we look at the highest cost per person, lung cancer is shown to cost in excess of $23,000, and also other cancers of the mouth and the throat. Despite cancer incurring the highest cost per person, highest cost of care, the cost of care is highest for myocardial infarctions, followed by peripheral arterial disease and stroke. So basically, if you look at this chart, you can see that the highest cost is actually, when you're looking at the total healthcare costs attributed to tobacco use by tobacco-related illness, this is for 2022. Myocardial infarction, which are the heart attacks, the peripheral arterial disease was second, the cerebrovascular accident, which is stroke, was third. If you look at the lung cancer and the cancer of the larynx, which are 6.8 and 2.5 here below, at individual costs, these cancers are very expensive. But if you look at the system costs, the myocardial infarction, which has a very high cost, you would wonder why. But the issue with cancer is because cancer tends to be diagnosed at a late stage when it is difficult to treat and when it is also very expensive to treat. But because of the late diagnosis of cancer, and especially with lung cancer, people don't survive for very long because they are diagnosed at advanced stages, and the treatment is also difficult. So that would explain why the costs here are lower, but the individual cost per person is much higher for lung cancer and for cancer of the larynx. If we can move on to the next one. Moving on to social harms of tobacco use, and this impacts individuals, families, as well as communities, associated with increased healthcare costs and also the reduced productivity due to illness, absenteeism when one is not able to work, and also the issue of diverting household resources from essentials such as food and education to buying tobacco products. and this is likely to result in poverty and hunger. Other social harms are the risk of serious illness, and also it is now known that people who smoke die about 10 years earlier than those who have never smoked. So there is the issue of early mortality. As we, oh, there's something at the bottom here. It's important also to remember that tobacco use does damage the airways, and this starts soon after initiation of smoking and gets progressively worse with continued smoking. Also important for us to remember that children of smokers are more likely to smoke or to be initiated into smoking early. So basically, I think my message for you this evening, tobacco damages nearly every organ system in the body. It is economic costs are either direct because of the treatment of the disease conditions that it causes, or else indirect due to productivity losses. And basically the costs of tobacco smoking far outweighs the financial benefits which we gain from the tobacco industry. The WHO has recognized tobacco as a leading cause of preventable death and disability. And really, tobacco and nicotine products now are the only legally available drugs that will kill you when used according to the manufacturer's instructions. So my message for you today is to choose tomorrow's health today. Do not start, or if you're already smoking, stop tobacco use. So on behalf of NCD Alliance, the last slide. There is another slide. Yeah, I'd just like to thank you for the invitation. Thank you for listening. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. There's one question, perhaps you can handle that in case there's others, then they will be addressed later. The question says, you mentioned that non-smokers are affected more by secondhand smoke than smokers, but how does this apply? Doesn't the smoker experience the cardiovascular? Doesn't the smoker experience cardiovascular disease risk just as much as a non-smoker? Is it because the second-hand smoker does not go through the filter, smoke from the burning tip of the cigarette, or is it that the smoker's body has more resilience due to continuous use?
Okay, it's an interesting question, but it is known that secondhand smoke is actually more dangerous. And I'm not advocating for people to smoke or that people who smoke are not at risk. But the fact that you're in a room which is full of smokers, which somebody is smoking, you're actually exposed to the smoke itself from the cigarettes, which is what the which contains a lot of these other chemicals that are not how can I put it? When you think of some of the chemicals in the tobacco smoke that the person inhales, that's like the nicotine which will be inhaled. But then a lot of the other things which are exhaled, those other chemicals which are contained are also going to be exhaled. And because in most cases, you don't realize that you're also at risk and you're also breathing in what this the smoker is breathing out, you're actually at more risk. It has been shown that you're actually at more risk of some of these non-communicable diseases than the smoker themselves. But I can dig up more information. I need to know who. And then, of course, there's the issue of the filter, which gets rid of all those other things. Okay. I don't know if I have adequately answered your question.
He says that he will maybe more research on his end on the same would be necessary. Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Thank you for that wonderful presentation. And also just to mention to anyone who is wondering why this is important for you to note in this session, why this session was very key for us even moving forward, is because you will be an advocate of tobacco control. And if you go towards, for example, policy work, you're supposed to bring in facts and figures to back up why you want a policy to be represented or to be pushed for. So this presentation is key to give you those key figures and facts that helps to make your work more tangible. But also beyond that, it just opens your eyes to the further need for advocacy, because you've realized that the main costs for health issues pertaining to tobacco use is not just lung cancer like most of us initially think, right? So thank you so much, Terry, for that. Can we give her a round of applause using the emojis that are there? And if you have any more questions, kindly share on the chat, and maybe have like a few people just highlight the key areas where the key takeaways on the chat, please. I see someone has already posted that great session. The harms are well explained and the statistics are crucial for advocacy. Much appreciation to the presenter, Dr. Catherine. Yeah. One more feedback and then we proceed to the next speaker. As we wait to hear from the next speaker, I'll just do a quick introduction. Her name is Martha Kumbe. She's a public health and digital media expert with a rich background in public health and digital media. She stands at the forefront of the digital development communication, offering innovative solutions to the contemporary challenges.
Jeremy, your audio is dropping.
Oh, sorry. It's on my end. Apologies for that. Can you hear me now?
It could be the network issue.
Yeah, apologies.
It's okay now.
It's okay now? All right. I yeah, the background.
Umepotea kabisa.
Okay. The kindly just go ahead, please.
Hi, Martha, you can just come on. I think Jeremy's network is dropping a bit.
Okay, I don't know if it was on my end. I couldn't hear anyone.
Yeah, her connection dropped for a moment.
Oh, okay. I had shared my presentation. I don't know if someone can put it up.
Certainly, she'll share it shortly.
Okay. Oh, thank you.
Monica, mute yourself.
Oh, thank you so much. Just to let you know that my name is Martha, if you didn't get the first point, and it's an honor to just share this space with passionate minds committed to the well-being of youths. Today we're going to, or at the moment, we're going to grasp some information or insights when it comes to understanding tobacco and its impact, especially on youths. And I'm very happy that we have Gen Zs on the room. So my name is Martha Kombe, Programs Manager, Den of Hope. And at Den of Hope, we work directly with youths in urban informal settlement like Isili, Kamkunji sub-county, spaces which are often ignored in policy, but targeted by industry. So I'm here today to unpack how tobacco industry is not just selling addiction, but also shaping narratives about health, identity, and even aspiration when it comes to the youth, and expounding it further to women, young women, young ladies. That also just appears. Oh yeah, the next slide. Thank you. So I would want maybe to start us off with a curious question, because I'm a curious being and would want all of us to share in the chat what tobacco or nicotine products have you seen this week? I know this week, yeah, either online or offline. Maybe I'll take two. I'll take two from the chat. Maybe to repeat, what tobacco or nicotine products have you seen this week, either online or offline? If someone can read the chat.
So there's vape.
Oh, there's vape. That's good.
Vape, there's Sportsman. There is the usual cigarette by Boda Rider.
Okay, thank you so much for, thank you for those who have shared. You can still be sharing, but I want us to reflect on how normalized these products have become in our day-to-day lives, especially ukiangalia TikTok, YouTube, YouTube influencers, even WhatsApp statuses. We can spot one or two things, and I didn't ask, I didn't probe more on where these people saw these products. So according to WHO, exposure of tobacco advertising, promotion, and sponsorship increases the livelihood that youth will start using tobacco. You get, we're not yet the next previous. So our reality is shaped by what surrounds us, what we normalize without realizing. And that's why we need to be more careful, not in the sense of shifting blame, but more of embodying the aspect of intentionality and awareness of all that surrounds us. So thank you. Next slide. We have seen one, like the emerging trends in the youth tobacco use. There are flavored vapes with names like Blueberry Eyes, Pink Lemonade, which are just accidental. We think it's accidental, but they are designed to lure young consumers. And by young, I mean also young ladies included. So if you see nicotine pouches, which looks like a chewing gum tin, and in most cases, they're sold right next to snacks. You see, snacks and sweets in some local kiosks. So social platform here, we've seen them filled with content glamorizing these products. So if I can say, in 2023, there was a study, if I'm not wrong, by the Ministry of Health that showed 15.8% of adolescents aged 13 to 17 had experimented on shisha. So the tobacco industry is shifting products, shifting the products that avoids the traditional regulations. So I don't know if you understand that, since the previous presenter had mentioned some of the regulations. So the previous, right now, there are new emerging products that are metamorphing from the regulations that we already have. That's why when we want to create policies, we need to see beyond the now and see how it can incorporate the future. So these new products, I think you've seen them, e-cigarettes and also nicotine pouches. They are termed as the harm reducing products. And some are even termed for C-section interventions as addiction therapy, reducing addiction therapy, yeah, which is a lie. It's just hooking them to another product. So the theory of planned behavior tells us that perceived norms and beliefs strongly influence youth decisions. So social media becomes a powerful norm builder. So by that I mean what we see sticks in our mind, then verbally we speak about it, then behavioral we embodied it as the day goes by. So tobacco products aren't new, but the way they are being sold to us, the youths, because I'm part of you guys, is more deceptive and dangerous than ever. Next slide. So when it comes to the real costs and the health harm, we usually call it the health burden. Tobacco use in adolescence affects the brain development, especially areas responsible for decision-making and also impulse control. Those are two important, very important aspects of our development stage. For example, if we want to make decisions sober, we can't. Impulse control, unaona mtu akona hasira every time, haezi manage their emotions. And this is one of the harms that tobacco products inachangia. So long-term effect include tunaona chronic bronchitis, increased heart rate, and also reproductive risks that I know the previous presenter mentioned about. So let me tell you about CDC, something boring at least. So according to CDC, I know we all know CDC from the COVID era, COVID-19 era. So CDC, according to them, nicotine exposure during adolescence can harm the part of the brain that controls attention. I know we all want to thrive in our studies. So this is one: attention, learning, mood, and also impulse control, as I mentioned. So for young girls, emerging research also links tobacco to use of early menopause, menstrual irregularities, and also aspect when the lady wants to procreate, then there are some issues with the pregnancy. There might be, yeah. So it can harm the baby beyond the mother. So we are seeing clearly that they are targeting the body that is not yet fully grown, because addiction is easier when you start young. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but it's very interesting. And before I made that statement, there are a lot of evidence that support that beyond what I've mentioned. So next slide. Yes. Yes. Hidden harms. Slide 6. Yes. Okay. So nicotine-free, just to highlight some of the narratives that the industry is using, nicotine-free doesn't also always means safe. Many such products, if you look at them, they still have addictive substances. So if I'm glad that you're getting this information right now, and you can discern these statements or narrative or ideologies that are within our communities. So products are designed to appear like everyday items. We've seen e-cigarettes looking like lipstick-sized vapes, mint-flavored pouches, very cool things that really lure us into our early graves, I can say. And I'm not intending to scare you, but it's actually some of the facts. So if we've seen the packaging also, they're really keen with colors. We've seen pink, glitters on some of these products, and I love glitters. So anything with glitters, you've hooked me up. And this we can see it's a tactic that targets gendered desired. So by gendered desire, I mean women like glitters. If you see these products more in pink, so you can easily tell that the audience or the desired audience for these products ni wanawake. So it's no longer about cigarettes, by the way, it's about deception. Social cognitive theory emphasizes, I don't know, mimi ndo nimepotea. Oh, you can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very clearly.
Thank you. I thought I was lost a while ago. So the social cognitive theory, I know we have psychology students, and this theory emphasizes on observational learning. In short, we say youth copy what they see. Especially when it's being celebrated. So this is a tactic that the industry took advantage of, and it's now really working on their side, because we're seeing more young women start smoking vapes, and the industry uses influencer, subtle branding. You will never know they're advertising. It's weird how the nicotine pouch was advertised. Everybody kept on doing a video saying the opposite. Like, don't take this, nini, or it will to mess up with your head, nini. So curious questions that young people really wanted to try it out so that they can see the dangers. It was a weird phase. So these are the tricks that the industry are using to lure youths into addiction. So just because it's slick or glamorous, kindly just remember, it doesn't mean that it's safe. Next, while I'm finalizing this, maybe something small of what we are doing. So De Novo currently are working with communities, social mobilization as a focal grounding, and looking into partnerships with schools, youth clubs, and I'm glad that SCAD is one of our trusted partners. We are also doing community dialogues and town halls. We've done media engagement, and also now looking to further advocacy campaigns, to seeing tobacco-free zones, also enforcing some of these tobacco control policies in the informal settlements. So we believe in that the youth must not just be involved, but they must lead. That's why you people are here to get that certificate, so that you can have your own small conversations in your own spaces. So we are currently launching, not launching, but one of the observation that we saw is doing social mobilization on tobacco control is that when youths lead conversations, most community listens. And this is one of the powerful aspects that we need to carry on with us. And Scott, thank you so much for believing in young people and trying to empower them to amplify their own voices, but not speaking on behalf of them. So we're saying people working and programming around youth needs to embody this strategy. So next slide. I would start by inviting us to write again. Indulge with me by telling me what is the one thing you've learned today that you didn't know before. And if the industry is organizing to hook us, we must organize harder for ourselves. How are we going to do that? So yeah, those are few remarks from my side. You can write it on the chat. What is that one thing that you've learned today that you didn't know before? As we finalize. Is there anybody who has shared anything on the chat?
Not yet.
Okay. So as we are also thinking about the questions that you're going to ask, if you go to the next slide, I would say thank you for showing up, and also in this fight. This fight needs your voice, and just to appreciate you, let's get connected. The name is still Den of Hope. Twitter, Den of Hope 14, and also our email address, denofhope@gmail.com. At gmail.com, yes. So those are my handles. I'll give the mic back to the speaker, to the convener.
All right. Thank you so much. There's a few responses to the question you just asked. One of them says that tobacco affects almost every part of the body. The other one says we have a farm of tobacco in Kenya. I mean company. The other one says, I think that glamorization of tobacco products is a major lesson for me. You don't really notice it until you are aware of how they're trying to squeeze tobacco into youth spaces.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you so much to you, Martha, and thank you to Den of Hope as well. Thank you to Dr. Catherine. Thank you to Kenya. Thank you to Benjamin as well. I just want to invite us to ask the questions that we have accrued over the session. We'll have a quick moment of Q&A. Kindly write your question on the chat and who you are addressing it to, and we'll respond to that. So as we respond to as those who have questions write the questions, kindly let's give a round of applause to Martha. Keep them coming, keep them coming. Kindly let's type our questions on the chat. I remember there was a question for Kenya, I believe. I hope you're still in chat. Is Kenya still here? If not, any of the moderators or the speakers can go ahead and answer. Are there any key intervention measures in the high prevalence region specifically Western Kenya, that you've mentioned. So I think this is referring to the farmers who are growing tobacco in Western Kenya. Perhaps?
Can I answer that?
Yes, please go ahead.
This is Karekezi. I do know that there is an issue of a couple of years back, Kenya launched the what is it called? They're encouraging farmers to grow beans instead of tobacco. So this is a WHO-led initiative where they're looking at tobacco-free farms. I can't remember the exact slogan, but they're basically what they're doing is they're encouraging farmers to stop growing tobacco, and they grow high protein content, high yielding beans. The project was launched, I think, either 2022 or 2023 during World No Tobacco Day, and it was launched in, I think it's Migori. And that was the first place where they started. So that's one of the initiatives which is ongoing.
Thank you, Sana Daktari. Patrick asks, are we going to fight against the farmers or the company? Maybe just to bring some light into that, most of the farmers of tobacco are very lowly paid, and they already are struggling with other issues such as food production and starvation. So we're not fighting the farmers, we're just equipping them to be able to do better on their own while not being exploited. Because again, the tobacco industry is not just exploiting young people, it's also exploiting those farmers. So yeah, Dr. Catherine, you have another question. Could you briefly explain on the Buerger's syndrome? I don't know if that's how it's pronounced. There's a question
What
for you.
syndrome?
Buerger's syndrome. Buerger's, I think that's how it's pronounced. I'm not sure.
BEU?
Buerger syndrome. By David Ndiba. David, you can even unmute and just ask your question. David?
Apologies, I'd have to pass on that. I'd have to look up and see what that is.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Then there is another question to Martha. Could you also clarify some interventions that are used in mitigating tobacco addiction, including nicotine patches, gums, and how can youth or us in this advocacy training tell the difference between the misleading labeling and the clinical approved nicotine replacement product? Martha, you got it? Did you lose me again?
I think you can repeat.
What are some of the interventions that are used in mitigating tobacco addiction, including nicotine pouches, gums, and how can youth or us in this advocacy training tell the difference between the misleading labeling and clinical approved nicotine replacement product?
Thank you for raising that important and often confusing issues. I can say, because in our advocacy, especially as youths, we must be able to tell the truth from manipulation. So, but here's where the problem lies. Tobacco industry have this, I don't know if it's a narrative stating harm reducing and nicotine free, yet they are not regulated. They're just flavored. So it's the same. I don't know if I can say it's the same, because we haven't also checked in terms of data, the content of nicotine within different products that are not yet vetted with the KBS. Is it KEBS? Yes, KEBS.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, so they are unregulated, flavored, and they're in our market. They have infiltrated our market in ways that appeal to the young people. You can see that they're not labeled. They're not. There are no. Yeah, they're not. They're no. If you can see the products, they're not branded. Most of them are not branded. So that is, I don't know if that is one of the things that you can look out for, but in terms of them being used as nicotine replacement therapy, I don't know. We need to check thoroughly, because it's a fall, if I can say, by the ministry, made by BAT in their own research, because if you Google, you'll find out that it exists. It's a therapy, it works. So it's up to us to see which sources we are looking for information. We can please check NCD, WHO, FCTC. There are a couple of sources of information about tobacco control that I will share with SCAD, and SCAD will share further with you, so that we can be able to get the correct and informed information, so that we can make also informed choices about, yeah. Catherine, you want to say something?
Not really, but if you're talking about nicotine replacement therapy, if those are clinically or pharmaceutically approved products, those would not be sold in a supermarket. Those would be sold
Yes,
in
exactly.
a
Pharmacy.
But if you're finding things being sold in a supermarket, those are basically nicotine-containing products, which are masquerading as something else, as sweets or whatever it is. But as we've learned this evening, nicotine is the addictive component in tobacco. And basically what they're doing is delivering the nicotine in a more efficient system and getting young people hooked on nicotine and the consequences of that. Unfortunately, as Martha has said, they're masquerading as other products. They maybe are masquerading as sweets, the way they are packaged, in a way to appeal to the youth and to the children. So unless we do something about this, we're going to have a very serious problem in the future, in the very near future, not even in the far future. And again,
Yes.
because of the way they're marketed, they're glamorous. Everybody thinks they're less harmful than tobacco, but in actual fact, they're actually more harmful than tobacco, because they'll have maybe, as Martha said, they haven't really regulated the contents of nicotine in those products. So you're actually getting probably a higher dose of nicotine from those products than you'd get in tobacco. So long-term effects likely to be worse than those of tobacco itself.
Yeah. Thank you, Catherine. And because I can say, because this is not just about products, it's about who profits off who's paying. So it's a sad thing, but I'm glad that we're in this space to just converse and discern, if I can put it. Back to you. I hope I answered. We've answered.
Yes, you have. And don't go anywhere. Don't dial that button. Before you move to, there's another question for you, but perhaps something I can also add to David Dimba's question. You asked some interventions that are used in mitigating tobacco addiction. So rehabilitation is one of them. Joining support groups. I think Den of Hope has peer-to-peer groupings that they have, but also rehabilitation is one way. So yeah, Perhaps I saw, Benjamin, your hand was up with regards to this same question. Would you like to chip in?
No, it's all right. It's been highlighted.
All right. Lovely. To Martha again, are there any ethical implications of tobacco advertising and marketing, especially when targeting the vulnerable population?
Yeah, that's a really critical question, because beyond the products, we must always ask ourselves who is being targeted and why. So it's a core marketing tobacco to vulnerable groups like young people, women, low-income communities, and also and I can say this is unethical, full stop. It's about exploiting systems of inequalities and also creating new addictions. So new addiction to them means a sustained profit margin for future. So in places where people already face stress, you can imagine unemployment, like right now, everybody is just having their own issues on the back, unemployment, under-resourced healthcare, we have our own issues. So I can say, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. You can say,
Oh.
Go ahead.
Oh, I wanted to say, I can say WHO has consistently flagged the tobacco industry, deliberately targeting the youth. And in Kenya also, there are organizations like SCAD, Den of Hope, and CDAC that have also highlighted or eliminated the deception. So as we've always been saying across this session, they're using colorful packaging, misleading health claims that are saying less harmful, social influencers. So from human rights lens, I can say this is a violation of violation of health, and also from a feminist lens, because I'm also a feminist, it's exploitation of young girls by selling us pink vapes labeled as empowerment. So in Nigeria, by the way, Nigerian movies, they explicitly, the actors use tobacco products, showing empowered women, empowered leadership, just to aspire to raise the aspiration of us wanting to be like them. So, and from a social justice lens, I can say it means targeting those with the least power to resist or access for help. Because when you are hooked and you're a young person and coming from a marginalized community, tuseme unatoka from one of the villages, the addiction is not, I can say it's not a lifestyle choice. When someone is misinformed, you can't really, the economic aspect of you getting out of the hook is really, really intense. So let's remember that addiction is not a lifestyle of choice. When someone is misinformed, pressured, or deliberately misled, like what we have analyzed. So as advocates, we must keep saying, marketing that harms people for profit is never ethical, especially when it hides behind the language, the narratives of choice and freedom. So back to you. I hope I've answered it.
Yes, you have. Yes, you have. In case there are any more questions, kindly put them in the chat. Someone says, and maybe this to just something to highlight. Maybe I'd like Benjamin to respond to this. Patrick Kadogu says, since we have a company of tobacco in Kenya and yet we are fighting against it, are we going to fight against it, or are we fighting beyond our expectations? Benjamin? All right. As we wait for him, is there any other question? If you've learned something, give me give me a thumbs up. Give me a thumbs up if you've learned something today that you didn't know before. Right. I see David Ndimba. I see Joshua Mutama. I see Faith. I see Grace. I see Henry. I see Cindy. I see Moses. I see Susan Grace. All right. I love that we've learned something. And to the person who's asking if it is futile to fight against the tobacco company that is in Kenya, that is ours apparently. We're already fighting against BATK already, which is not even a Kenyan company, it's an international company. Our voice must be heard, and that's why we are here. The work that we do does not fall into deaf ears. At a different tobacco control forum, I think it was the one that we did in KU, it was mentioned that we are currently standing on the advocacy work that was done by the people who are before us, right? An example is the ban on smoking in public, or even the advertisements on tobacco products. So, right, it is not futile. As for us is to do our part and to do it to the best of our ability. And that's why us as CAD, we are very intentional about equipping each individual that we can to ensure that nobody's left behind, but most importantly, that people are aware, so that if the 31 of us in this meeting, we are able to make conscious decisions when it comes to tobacco products, and even with everything that involves that, so that we're not actively being partakers of tobacco, yet we are informed, right? I see that Dr. Catherine has something to add. Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for your response. It is not a futile effort. And as you said, we're actually riding on the work that people did in the past, the bans on advertising of tobacco, not smoking in public, and so on. Really, as you have mentioned, everybody needs to be aware about the dangers of tobacco and nicotine products so that they can make an informed choice. If you know and you choose to smoke and you choose to use nicotine products, that's your choice. But we stand for the people who don't know, the voiceless who have no voice. Somebody needs to speak for them. Somebody needs to protect them from the harms of the tobacco industry and other harmful industries across the world, not just in our country. And that is what we stand for. It is not an easy battle, but it's somebody has to do that work, and somebody has to speak for the voiceless. So I rest my case there.
Thank you very much. I believe that has been addressed. Thank you so much. Thank you to each one of us who has stayed up until this point. We will have our session, module 2, tomorrow. Kindly remember, as it was pointed out in the chat, that for you to receive your certificate, you have to be here for all the sessions. You have to be here for all the 4 sessions, for the one today, the one tomorrow, the other one on Thursday, as well as the one on Saturday, so that you get the full comprehensive outlook, because we're still going to do policy work, tobacco taxation, and we will come to all those questions that you're still having about the companies involved in tobacco. You will learn more about them on tobacco taxation and see how much tax evasion that they're how much taxes that they're evading that could also be used in healthcare. I remember in Dr. Catherine's graph, there was 158 million USD going to healthcare, and one of the costs and implications of tobacco use that should end a percentage of taxes on tobacco should go there. So kindly plug in for all those sessions. Again, as had been highlighted in the WhatsApp group, please fill in the pre-training form that I had shared earlier. If you've not seen it, please check it also in the chat, and hope to see you here at 6:50 so that we can start by 7 and we can be on time. So thank you very much. I wish us a lovely night. If there's no any further questions, and yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Good night, everyone.